If dinosaurs had movie roles, this one would have been cast as the confident, sharp-smiling rival, the kind who doesn't need to be the biggest to steal every scene. With a crocodile-like body, armor-lined skin, and a horn rising from its snout like nature's own crown, this Jurassic hunter looked both elegant and dangerous at once. It first entered science in 1884, when Othniel Charles Marsh described a remarkably complete skeleton found in Garden Park, Colorado. That fossil, discovered in the Morrison Formation, became the cornerstone of everything we know about this species, and remains the best example we've ever found. Later, a few more remains turned up in Utah and even Portugal, but there's debate about whether they represent a new species or simply different growth stages of the same one. Other fragmentary bones from Tanzania, Uruguay and Switzerland were once linked to it, though most experts now doubt those connections. In life, this predator stretched about 5 to 7 meters, or 16 to 23 feet long. Compact by Jurassic standards, but built for precision rather than power. It had deep jaws filled with long, serrated teeth, and a set of short yet functional arms, ending in sharp claws. Along its back and tail ran a subtle ridge of bony plates, giving it a reinforced, almost armored appearance. This creature belonged to one of the earliest branches of theropods, the same broader lineage that would eventually give rise to birds. It shared features with Geniodictes from Argentina, another long-toothed carnivore, while an older dinosaur once thought to be its ancestor, Ceratosaurus, turned out to belong to a completely different family, the early Tyrannosauroids. Sharing its ecosystem with predators like Allosaurus and Torvosaurus, it likely filled its own specialized niche, perhaps targeting smaller prey or ambushing fish along riverbanks. And that horn, not a battering ram as once believed, but a display piece, a natural symbol of strength, identity, and maybe even swagger. The first discovered skeleton, which became the holotype of Ceratosaurus nasicornis, measured between 5.3 and 5.7 meters, or 17 to 18.7 feet in length, though it remains unclear whether this individual had reached full adulthood. When Othniel Marsh described it, he estimated its weight at roughly half that of a contemporary Allosaurus. Modern estimates place it between 418 and 670 kilograms, or 922 to 1,480 pounds. Later discoveries revealed substantially larger individuals. One notable specimen was initially estimated at 8.8 meters, or 29 feet long by James Madsen, though more recent assessments suggest a length of about 7 meters, or 23 feet. Weight estimates for this specimen vary widely, ranging from 452 to 980 kilograms, or up to 2,160 pounds. A second skeleton was somewhat smaller, with an estimated weight of 275 kilograms, or 606 pounds. A third, yet undescribed specimen is claimed to be the largest known, though no formal measurements have been published. In the Jurassic landscapes of the Morrison and Laurinia formations, Ceratosaurus shared its world with some serious heavyweights. Fossils show it living alongside other large predators like Allosaurus and the megalosaurid Torvosaurus. In places like Garden Park, Colorado, Ceratosaurus pops up alongside Allosaurus, while quarries in Utah, Dry Mesa, Cleveland Lloyd and Dinosaur National Monument reveal at least 3 large predators roaming the same grounds. Even Wyoming's Como Bluff shows a similar predator mix. But here's the twist. Ceratosaurus was the rare one. In sites where it coexisted with Allosaurus, it was outnumbered on average 7.5 to 1. How did all these big predators avoid stepping on each other's toes? Donald Henderson had an intriguing idea. He noticed 2 morphs of Allosaurus. A short-snouted type with a high, wide skull and backward slanting teeth, and a long-snouted type with a lower skull and vertical fangs. The short-snouted morph probably had a stronger, cat-like bite, while the long-snouted morph and Ceratosaurus were more like dogs, using long teeth for slashing quick bites. According to Henderson, Ceratosaurus likely avoided the long-snouted Allosaurus by sticking to habitats dominated by the short-snouted morph, or by hunting different prey. Its impressively long teeth may even have doubled as social signals for other Ceratosaurus. Later studies agreed that Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus shared habitats, but likely had different hunting strategies. Some researchers suggested Ceratosaurus favored aquatic prey, lungfish, turtles, and crocodile-like reptiles, while Allosaurus preferred open-terrain herbivores, like sauropods and stegosaurs, though it might have taken to fish when large prey was scarce. Ceratosaurus's deep, flexible tail, with vertical spines and strong chevrons, may have helped it swim or maneuver near water, whereas Allosaurus had longer legs and a stiffer body, built for running down dinosaurs on land. Evidence of scavenging also pops up in the fossil record. Some Allosaurus bones show bite marks, likely from Ceratosaurus or Torvosaurus, suggesting that these predators weren't just hunting, they were also opportunistic, making the most of every carcass they found. High concentrations of bite marks in some quarries hint at either seasonal scarcity, or perhaps that the fossil record just happens to preserve these predator hangouts exceptionally well. For its body size, the skull was surprisingly large, a clear sign that this dinosaur was built to hunt. The holotype skull of Ceratosaurus nasicornis measured around 55 centimeters long, or about 22 inches, stretching from the tip of its snout all the way to the joint where it connected to the neck. Because the fossil is a bit distorted, its true width is hard to pin down, and early reconstructions, like Gilmore's in 1920, made it look wider than it really was. Another specimen had an even longer skull, about 60 centimeters or 24 inches, but it was slimmer and more elongated. The back of the skull wasn't overly heavy, filled with openings that lightened the structure, but the jaws stayed deep enough to house some truly impressive, blade-like teeth. And of course, you can't talk about Ceratosaurus without mentioning its most famous feature, that horn. Sitting right on top of the snout, this horn was formed by two fused nasal bones. What we find today is only the bony core, but in life, it would have been covered by a tough keratin sheath, making it look taller and sharper. In the main specimen, the horn core itself was about 13 centimeters or 5 inches long, and 7 centimeters, 2.8 inches tall. Another specimen had a slightly different version, longer but lower. Just behind the horn, the skull has a shallow oval groove, another trait that helps paleontologists recognize Ceratosaurus right away. Add in those small bony ridges over its eyes, and you've got a face that was both fierce and unmistakable. Younger individuals had smaller, unfused horns, suggesting these display features became more prominent as the dinosaurs matured. Its teeth were every bit as intimidating as the skull that held them. The very front of the snout had just 3 teeth per side, fewer than in most meat-eating dinosaurs, but they were massive. The main upper jawbone, the maxilla, carried about 15 teeth in the holotype, with the first 8 being long and strong before tapering down in size towards the back. Each one was finely serrated, like steak knives, around 10 serrations per 5 millimeters. Other specimens show a bit of variation. The longest teeth reached 9.3 centimeters or 3.7 inches, about the same height as the lower jaw itself. For comparison, that's a feature you rarely see outside of close relatives, like Geniodictes. Down in the lower jaw, things were just as fierce, with 11 to 15 slightly straighter, slimmer teeth, perfect for slicing through meat rather than crushing bone. Taken together, that skull and those teeth paint a vivid picture of Ceratosaurus, a sleek, horned predator, fine-tuned for precision, speed, and deadly efficiency in the Jurassic world. The backbone of Ceratosaurus tells a story of balance, power, and a little bit of Jurassic flair. We don't know the exact number of vertebrae because some sections of the spine are missing, but at least 20 bones formed its neck and back. In the middle of the neck, the vertebrae were about as long as they were tall, giving it a flexible but strong support for swinging its head. Toward the front and the back of the neck, the bones were shorter than they were tall, and those neural spines sticking up, big, especially along the back, where some were as tall as the vertebrae were long. The sacrum, 6 fused bones connecting the spine to the hips, arched up slightly, keeping things light but strong. Its tail was a beast on its own, around 50 vertebrae long, making up about half the dinosaur's body length, roughly 2.8 meters or 9 feet. High neural spines and long chevrons underneath made it deep and muscular, not just for show. The tail was basically a giant biological counterweight and powerhouse muscle machine, pulling the thighs back to launch this predator forward. The arms were small but interesting. The shoulder blade and coracoid were fused into a single piece, and Ceratosaurus kept 4 fingers on each hand. unlike most later theropods that trimmed down to 3. The fingers were short and compact, more about precision than brute force, and even the tiny first digit, think of it like a Jurassic pinky, was there, just tucked away. And yeah, Ceratosaurus had those small, oddly shaped bone plates, called osteoderms, running along the midline of its body. Some lined its neck and tail, forming a sort of spinal accent, while others were scattered across the body. They weren't just decoration, they probably gave the skin extra protection and a touch of prehistoric flair. One of the holotypes even had a roughly square plate, though we're not sure exactly where it sat. When Othniel Charles Marsh first described Ceratosaurus nasicornis, he noticed features that no other theropod was known to have at the time. The fused pelvis and fused metatarsus were familiar from modern birds, which Marsh thought was a clear hint that dinosaurs and birds were closely related. To make sure Ceratosaurus stood out from familiar predators like Allosaurus, Megalosaurus, and the early Coelurosaurs, he went all in. He created a brand new family, Ceratosauridae, and even a new infraorder, Ceratosauria, just for this dinosaur. Not everyone agreed. In 1892, Marsh's rival, Edward Drinker Cope, yes, the same guy from the infamous Bone Wars, argued that unique features like the nasal horn weren't enough to justify a whole new genus. He reassigned it to Megalosaurus, calling it Megalosaurus nasicornis. Thankfully, later studies corrected this, and Ceratosaurus was reinstated as its own genus. Still, its exact place in the dinosaur family tree remained a hot topic for decades. Different researchers shuffled it around between families like Dinodontidae, Megalosauridae, and Carnosauria, and even lumped it with Coelurosauria at times. In 1920, Charles Gilmore suggested it was actually one of the most basal theropods after the Triassic, basically a lone branch that deserved its own family. But it wasn't until the rise of cladistics in the 1980s that Marsh's idea of Ceratosauria as a distinct group gained real traction. The discovery of South American relatives, like Abelisaurus and Carnotaurus, helped solidify its place. Today, we know Ceratosauria branched off early from the lion leading to modern birds, making it a basal group of theropods. Within this group, Ceratosaurus sits alongside basal members, like Elaphrosaurus and Deltadromeus, while more derived families like Anoasauridae and Abelisauridae form part of Abelisauroidea, or, as recent studies suggest, Ceratosauridae. Its exact position is still debated, but some analyses pair it with the long-toothed Geniodictes, and even Eabelisaurus from Argentina, forming a small but distinct branch within Ceratosauridae. Back in Marsh's day, a cast of the Ceratosaurus brain cavity was made during skull preparation. From this early cast, Marsh concluded that the brain was medium-sized, but still far larger than the brains of plant-eating dinosaurs. Later researchers couldn't be 100% sure of this, though, since the skull bones had been cemented together, making verification tricky. Fast forward to Frita, Colorado, where specimen MWC1 gave scientists a much better look. Its nearly perfect brain case was CT scanned, revealing an intricate map of the brain, inner ear, and cranial blood vessels. What they found? Ceratosaurus had a brain very much in line with other basal theropods. Think Allosaurus, not quite as monstrous as Tyrannosaurus, but perfectly tuned for a predator of its size. The sense of smell? Pretty sharp, though not at T-Rex levels. The olfactory bulbs were smaller than T-Rex's, but still formidable, hinting that Ceratosaurus could sniff out prey or carrion with ease. Its semicircular canals, the balance sensors inside the inner ear, show it was a natural biped, always moving with stability and grace. The largest canal, typical of bipedal animals, confirms it was built for precise head movements. Analysis of the lateral semicircular canal even suggests that Ceratosaurus carried its head and neck horizontally, giving it a predator's poised, ready-to-strike stance. All the North American Ceratosaurus fossils we know of come from the Morrison Formation, a treasure trove of dinosaur bones stretching across the western United States. These rocks were mostly deposited in rivers and floodplains, with occasional shallow marine layers, creating the perfect conditions for preserving Jurassic life. Radiometric dating tells us this formation spans roughly 156 to 147 million years ago, covering the late Oxfordian, Kimmeridgian, and early Typhonian stages of the late Jurassic. Ceratosaurus specifically pops up in the Kimmeridgian and Typhonian layers. The Morrison Basin itself stretched from New Mexico all the way to Alberta and Saskatchewan, forming as the early Rocky Mountains pushed up to the west, with rivers carrying sediments into swampy lowlands. Think of it as a vast, semi-arid landscape with distinct wet and dry seasons, a Jurassic world full of life. Interestingly, this environment was roughly contemporaneous with Portugal's Lourinhã Formation and Tanzania's Tendaguru Formation. The Morrison Formation was dominated by giants. Sauropods like Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Camarasaurus, and Diplodocus roamed these floodplains, while predators like Allosaurus, Torvosaurus, and Ornitholestes patrolled at the top of the food chain. Allosaurus was the undisputed king, making up 70 to 75% of theropod fossils. But there were smaller players too. Fishes, frogs, salamanders, turtles, lizards, crocodile relatives, and pterosaurs like Harpactinaphus soared over the landscape. Even the plants paint a vivid picture. Rivers lined with ferns and tree ferns, fern-dominated savannas dotted with araucaria like conifers, and a mix of mosses, horsetails, cycads, ginkgos, and conifers throughout. Across the Atlantic, Ceratosaurus also appears in Portugal's Lourinhã Formation, specifically the Porto Novo member. Many of the same appear here: Allosaurus, Torvosaurus, and the herbivorous sauropods, like Dinerosaurus and the Stegosaur Murugaia. This similarity hints at a temporary land bridge between North America and Iberia during the late Jurassic, allowing some dinosaurs to roam between continents. However, other groups, like certain sauropods, turtles, and crocodiles, remained distinct, suggesting that while some species mingled, others were already drifting down separate evolutionary paths. It was a world in flux. Rivers, forests, and floodplains teeming with life, and Ceratosaurus prowling as one of its rare but striking predators. Despite its impressive presence, Ceratosaurus eventually faded from the fossil record, leaving paleontologists to ponder the reasons behind its disappearance. One prevailing theory is that Ceratosaurus faced intense competition from Allosaurus, which was more abundant and possibly more adaptable. Allosaurus's dominance in the ecosystem might have outcompeted Ceratosaurus for resources, leading to the latter's decline. Additionally, environmental changes during the late Jurassic, such as shifts in climate and vegetation, could have altered the habitats and food sources that Ceratosaurus relied on, further contributing to its extinction. Another perspective suggests that Ceratosaurus's specialized hunting strategies, possibly focusing on aquatic prey, might have limited its adaptability to changing conditions. As ecosystems evolved, species that could adapt to a broader range of environments and diets had a survival advantage. However, it's important to note that the exact cause of Ceratosaurus's extinction remains speculative. The fossil record doesn't provide definitive evidence pinpointing a single factor. Instead, it's likely a combination of ecological pressures, including competition, environmental changes, and perhaps even disease, played roles in its eventual disappearance.